What is going on, everybody? This is Andrew from DeFiancy. So we decided to make an additional video covering the markets today because we have some really big events happening tomorrow, which is Wednesday, and also on Thursday. But before we get into that stuff, I want to talk a little bit about the charts per usual. So we're looking at Bitcoin right now. We're on the 15-minute. I'm going to remove some of these lines here. We're going to zoom out. So as you can see, if you remember in our last video, we had talked about how there was a good chance we were going to break the top of this range. And well, as soon as we broke it and it became obvious, there was a lot of people who entered shorts, but I actually watched this as it started to move down. And this was not like retail selling. This was very large players with a lot of firepower who were sending this down once we broke the top of this range, and they had been selling this whole time. The order flow was very strong, and I'm showing you guys this to point out that this is pretty much a confirmed deviation right here. Okay, that is not bullish. Okay, no matter how you look at this, there really isn't a happy face to put on this if you were expecting this to to continue its rally up. That's pretty much not going to happen at this point, minus some surprises this week with earnings and or something at the FOMC, which would indicate that the Fed could switch, pivot their rate hike quantitative tightening strategy the opposite direction. That's really the only things I think that could stop it, and that seems very unlikely that those two things could occur, but you can't rule them out. So let's talk about what could happen next here. Okay, there's a lot that could happen. We're not going to act like we know exactly how this would play out, but we know the ranges. We know the range limits here, guys. This is pretty much the range low here. Technically, this is the low here, but you could kind of look at this as a deviation right now. However, to actually confirm that you would break to the downside, you would need to break this level and hold it. So I'm actually going to use that as the range low because ultimately this is where I do believe we will come back and test now. I think now that we've lost that range high, the idea that this whole event here was a black swan and a contagion, it wasn't, it was an emotional downtrend that wasn't really coupled with rational, I guess, decisions, is not true. So a lot of people thought that this was just kind of like a black swan and that really true value was going to be above this range. It's just showing you that's not true. The market doesn't value Bitcoin above this range, period. You can try to act like that's, that the market's wrong, but no, it's not. And whether it's wrong or not, it doesn't matter. But this is just the reality at this point. And in the POC right here, I'm going to put this line here, at about 20.5, I got to be honest with you guys. For me, this is the final straw. Like if you don't hold, basically where we are now, if you don't hold this, you're almost guaranteed to test value lower. Okay. I mean, like the chances of it bobbing below this and then wanting just to come back up, it just typically doesn't happen. Because the people who move a lot of volume around, they're not going to buy until you confirm this level down here. Now you may think that's silly, but that's just how the markets work. The people who really move this thing around, they don't just buy to buy. They calculate these things out very carefully. And typically when you fail to break out of a range, especially when you don't hold the middle of the range, you're almost guaranteed, especially in a bear market, to test the bottom of the range. Now this is dynamic and and equities is a big part of this, but I can almost guarantee you at this point, and again, not financial advice, that if you don't hold this POC, somewhere in here it's going to get tested. And I actually think that you probably don't hold this level, to be honest with you. You probably don't hold it. You probably end up breaking down below this level. And we talked about that, in a previous video. And I don't think it happens overnight. Okay, these things oftentimes take a minute to play out, but you're really looking at a situation where, if you don't hold this range, I mean, it's not really rocket science. Like, you're going to end up testing value lower. And if you look on this chart, let me turn this off. You can't really see it probably that well, but this is, there's support around here, which is about 13K. And then there's another line of support, that's about like 8K or something like that. Like you're going to test probably this top level first. Maybe you get, a little bounce on the way there at 15 for whatever reason people think that could happen. But ultimately, I think this 13K level around there, 13, 12, 10, whatever, it's going to be, a level where you'll get some respect, where people will want to step back in. But in between there, I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of interest. So that's why this really is a key level to hold. You don't hold it and you have significant action to the downside. So ETH is actually in a completely different place at this point. And it was because it had such a big move up. It's already had a significant retrace from the top here. It's already down like 15%. ETH is just going to follow. I mean, although there's a narrative, basically if it doesn't hold in this level here, this around 1250 or something like that, you're coming back down here as well. No matter that, although there's a narrative, when there's significant selling pressure in equities and Bitcoin, it's going to follow. It's just how it works. Now, don't get me wrong. If equities does get a bounce, ETH is going to be the one to bounce the strongest, the hardest. And that's going to be going forward until the merge. There will be more interest in Bitcoin than any other asset, consistently, as we approach it. So it's really do or die for ETH, though. It has to hold this level in here, or you're going to get a test of this, of this level down here, which is around 1,000, something like that. So, I was telling people all week, last week, be very careful up here, because this was, I thought this would happen anyway, but now there's a reason for it to go down. Okay. The reason is, and we're going to talk about this. We know about earnings. We talked about that last week. But one of the factors, and this is the most dynamic factor of how these markets could move, is what does the market want to, how is it going to behave when it is like when we are definitively in a recession? And I'm showing you this White House statement here. This is on their webpage. They actually are changing the definition of what they consider to be a recession. And what that signals to me is that they already know that we are in a recession, at least according to the current definition of a recession. And they're basically preparing for the backlash for that. So this is kind of funny. I mean, this is not a political opinion. It's just kind of funny. Like, their solution is to just change the definition, and they're getting a lot of flack for that, as they should. But the signal is the fact that they need to do this in the first place is that they already have the information. They already know that we're probably in a recession, guys. So they're preparing you. They're preparing to be able to handle the press when they're asking a bunch of questions, right? So Thursday is when the actual data comes out, and if Thursday's data shows that that we have negative GDP again for the second consecutive month, then we're in a recession. That has been the textbook definition for a very long time. Okay. Now, of course, you're going to have these people in the administration that are going to say that isn't true, but there's very little economists that would disagree with what I'm saying. Okay. That's not a political statement. I'm just being honest. Okay. So this is really, in my opinion, the big next narrative for crypto, because I'm not so sure this really affects the market in a negative direction like a lot of people think, that we're in a recession. Because to be honest, it appears to me that there's many people in the markets have a lot of capital that want there to be a recession, because they believe that is what will ultimately cause the Fed to pivot their policy, which is quantitative tightening and their interest rate hikes. And to be honest, that's a very logical assessment. I'm just not convinced that would happen in the short term. But a recession means that things aren't good. And when things aren't good, the Fed typically isn't going to put additional strain on the economy. So I do believe that you are kind of seeing the beginning of the pivot here. Again, do not take that as, I'm not saying the Fed is going to pivot tomorrow or even this month or next month, but you're kind of seeing where this could go. You know, if we get some negative GDP data and just negative earnings, it's going to show that the economy isn't doing that well. And, you know, the Fed has basically said, well, we're justified in our actions in increasing interest rates and quantitative tightening because our economy is doing so well. Well, they won't be able to say that anymore if this data shows what it appears to be coming out in a couple of days. So I'm not going to spend too much more time on that, but this is really, really important. This is probably the most important. This will be considered probably one of the most important weeks in crypto and just finance in general, because this could mark a major pivot point and take us down further. Or, I mean, you know, if all of these things are not what I think they will be, you know, maybe we get some relief. We'll finish this off talking a little bit about DeFi here, DeFi Pulse. Look, DeFi is just flat. There's really no change since the last, since the last video. There's really not a whole lot to talk about. Look, people are building, protocols are still doing, what they always do, and that's build. They're keeping their heads down, staying focused. But for the most part, things are just where they've left off. I'm not going to really cover too much in here because I really just wanted to show you guys some of the things coming out in the traditional markets, or the broader markets, Bitcoin, Ethereum, because this is really going to impact people's portfolios. Let me go back to Bitcoin. If we aren't able to hold this bottom of the range, you're talking about a significant downtrend. Just to give you an idea of where we are right now, I mean, you're talking maybe like 35% on Bitcoin. All right, guys. Well, that's pretty much all I want to talk about today. Again, none of this is financial advice. Things can change on a dime, but we're going to see some potential fireworks, a lot of volatility over the next few days. Until next time, happy hunting, friends.